Keanu Reeves, one of the most admired actors in Hollywood, quietly walked into a luxury car dealership. To him, it was just another day, but what was about to happen would change everything. And when the truth about him came to light, the consequences would be more than surprising, they would be unforgettable. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. It was a typical morning in Los Angeles, with a blue sky stretching like an invitation for something special. Keanu Reeves walked the streets, discreet in his black leather jacket and worn jeans. His calm demeanor contrasted with the admiring glances of a few people who recognized him. He had always been the same, someone who never let fame go to his head. With a simple smile, he waved to a fan here, thanked a compliment there, and continued on his way without haste. Midway through his route, he stopped at a cafe he had frequented for years. He greeted the barista by name as he always did. "Good morning, Oliver. How are things going?" "Well, Keanu. The usual." "The usual, please." As he waited for his coffee, his thoughts wandered. There was something he had been searching for over the past few months. It wasn't just a passing desire, but an idea that combined his love for cars with his wish to do something meaningful. Perhaps a rare vehicle, something he could restore and use for a good cause, maybe as a donation or a special tribute. With his coffee in hand, he resumed his journey. There was a dealership in mind, famous for the luxurious and exclusive cars it offered. That was where he hoped to find what he was looking for. When he stepped through the glass doors of the dealership, Keanu was greeted by an atmosphere that exuded wealth. The floor gleamed, reflecting the flawless finishes of the cars on display. The sound of footsteps was muffled by plush carpeting, and the air carried the unmistakable scent of new leather. Well-dressed employees moved through the showroom, attending to clients adorned in expensive suits and sophisticated accessories. Keanu, in his simplicity, was nearly unnoticed, nearly. A few curious glances turned his way, followed by hushed whispers. He ignored the murmurs and focused on what truly mattered. His eyes fixed on a car at the back, a rare model that seemed to belong to another era. Every detail caught his attention, the curved lines, the immaculate paintwork, the aura of exclusivity. He had been seeking this. Resolute, Keanu approached a salesman who was distracted by his phone. "Excuse me, could you tell me more about this model?" he asked, his voice calm and polite. The salesman glanced up for only a moment with little interest. "Hang on, I'll get someone," he replied before walking away without looking back. Keanu watched the man leave. He kept his expression calm, but something in his face shifted. A slight furrow of his brow, almost imperceptible, suggested the situation was beginning to bother him. Even so, he stayed where he was, studying the details of the car that had so captivated him. Meanwhile, the atmosphere around him seemed to grow more hostile. Not through direct actions, but through the looks and whispers exchanged among the employees. "Does he even know where he is?" one murmured. "Doesn't look like he's buying anything here," another replied. Keanu heard them but pretended not to. He rubbed his chin, a subtle gesture that masked his discomfort. He preferred not to react, not yet. Standing by the car, he waited for a response. That's when he noticed someone approaching him. It was the manager, walking with a stiff posture and an appraising look. The discomfort in the air seemed to thicken as if each of the manager's steps carried a weight of judgment. The manager finally stopped in front of Keanu, looking at the car, then at the man studying it with a faint smile. "This model is exclusive, very rare," said the manager, his tone sounding more like a test than an explanation. "That's exactly what I'm looking for," Keanu replied, his voice firm but still polite. The manager assessed him once more from head to toe. There was something in his gaze, a mixture of doubt and disdain. "Well, I hope you're ready. This car isn't for just anyone." Keanu held his gaze, saying nothing. He simply smiled, almost imperceptibly, but his eyes didn't waver. They didn't back down. The manager took a step back, crossing his arms. What no one knew was that Keanu was far more than just anyone. The man standing before them wasn't just a casual customer, but one of the most admired actors in the world, known not only for his talent but also for his integrity and humility. When the truth about him came to light, the consequences wouldn't just be surprising, they would be unforgettable. Keanu remained by the rare car, carefully analyzing its details, the texture of the bodywork, the impeccable shine of the paint, and the classic design that stirred genuine admiration within him. It was exactly what he was looking for. However, the atmosphere around him seemed at odds with the moment. The stares directed at him and the whispered comments created a growing sense of discomfort. A few minutes later, the manager finally appeared. Richard, a man with a rigid posture and a sharp gaze, walked toward him with firm steps as though every movement was calculated to assert his status. He stopped a few paces from Keanu, crossing his arms and flashing a smile that felt more like provocation than courtesy. "Interested in this model?" Richard asked, his tone nearly mocking. "Yes, it's an impressive car." "I'd like to know more about it," Keanu replied, remaining calm. Richard looked him up and down, lingering on his faded jeans and worn leather jacket. He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the audacity of this man to walk in looking like that. "Interesting," he murmured with a voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is one of our most exclusive models. Very few people even get to see one of these, let alone own it." Keanu stood firm, but the tension in the air was already palpable. Richard took a small step to the side, as if to block Keanu from getting any closer to the car. "And you do realize this car costs more than some homes in Beverly Hills, right? It's not something just anyone can take home," Richard continued, his voice sharp. Keanu frowned slightly but kept his tone polite. "I'm aware. That's why I'm here." "Interested. Could you tell me more about it?" he insisted, trying to ignore the manager's hostility. Richard let out a dry laugh, a sound carrying more disdain than humor. He crossed his arms again and leaned slightly forward. "Look, I don't know how to put this more simply, but models like this attract a certain kind of clientele, people who understand what they're buying. You know, and with all due respect, you don't exactly seem to fit the profile." Keanu took a deep breath, trying to contain the discomfort that was now beginning to morph into something closer to indignation. He tilted his head slightly, as though trying to confirm he'd heard correctly. "Profile," he repeated neutrally. "Yes, profile," Richard emphasized. "Our cars aren't just vehicles, they're symbols of status, success, exclusivity, things that, sorry to say, don't seem to align much with, well, this," he said, gesturing theatrically toward Keanu's clothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Some employees stopped what they were doing to watch the scene, while others pretended they weren't listening. Keanu didn't respond immediately. He stared at Richard for a long moment, as though carefully measuring his words. "Curious how you seem to know so much about people just by what they're wearing. That says more about you than it does about me," Keanu finally said, his voice still calm but laced with firmness. Richard narrowed his eyes, clearly irritated by the response. He stepped closer, invading Keanu's personal space, lowering his voice slightly though the acidic tone remained. "Listen here, buddy. I see people like you all the time. They come in, look at the cars, dream a little, and then leave without spending a dime. If you're here to play pretend, I'll ask you not to waste any more of my time or my team's time." Keanu didn't move, but his posture now conveyed something different. It was no longer just patience, there was a silent determination in his eyes. "And what if I'm not here to dream?" he asked simply. Richard let out a short laugh and shook his head as though finding the question absurd. "Then I'd say you're in the wrong place, because this place is for people who can pay, people who have something to prove. And honestly, you don't look like you have either." The air around them seemed to grow heavier, oppressive. Keanu looked at Richard for a few more seconds, his discomfort now transformed into something deeper, almost a restrained indignation. He gave a slight smile, not one of joy, but of someone who had fully understood the kind of person he was dealing with. "Funny. I always thought the real luxury was treating people with respect." "Maybe you should think about that," Keanu said, his voice calm but cutting. Keanu stood firm before the manager, Richard, who now radiated anger and contempt with every word. The tension in the room was palpable, and the employees and customers nearby could no longer hide that they were watching the confrontation. Richard's hostile tone grew sharper, as though he needed to win this argument to reaffirm his authority. "People like you only come here to waste everyone's time," Richard said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "This isn't a stroll through the park, and it's definitely not a place for dreamers with worn jackets and empty pockets." Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying the man in front of him with a calm but penetrating gaze. He took a deep breath before replying, carefully choosing his words. "Funny you talk about wasting time when you're so busy judging others by what they were instead of who they are. Maybe you should think about what really matters," he said, his voice steady but resolute. Richard narrowed his eyes, his face now flushed with frustration. He stepped forward, invading Keanu's personal space. "Oh, I know exactly what matters," he snapped, his tone laced with venom. "And it's certainly not moral lessons from someone who thinks they have the right to walk in here like they belong. You don't know who you're dealing with." Keanu didn't flinch. He held his ground, his gaze locked with Richard's. This only further fueled the manager's anger, realizing his words were having no effect. Richard completely lost control. "You don't tell me what to do," Richard shouted, raising his fist in a rash attempt to intimidate Keanu, or perhaps even to strike him. But Keanu reacted swiftly, with the composure of someone accustomed to tense situations. He raised his hand and caught Richard's fist midair. The movement was firm yet not aggressive, a gesture of restraint, not retaliation. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Richard stood still, stunned that his blow had been so easily intercepted. The entire showroom fell silent, all eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Keanu looked directly into Richard's eyes, his expression now carrying something deeper. He didn't appear angry, but there was an almost unsettling strength in his voice when he spoke. "The anger you're feeling has nothing to do with me. Maybe it's time to look inward and deal with that before you take it out on others." He released Richard's fist with the same calm demeanor with which he had stopped it. The manager stepped back, clearly shaken, but he tried to mask his insecurity with a rigid posture. Keanu adjusted his jacket, stepped back slightly, and cast one last look at Richard. Respect doesn't cost a thing, but for some people, it seems harder to find than any car in this place. Without waiting for a response, Keanu turned and began walking toward the exit. The showroom remained silent, save for the sound of his firm footsteps on the gleaming floor. The employees and customers stood frozen, some still holding their breath as though unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Then something caught Keanu's attention. A young man standing in a corner of the dealership was holding up his phone. He had been recording not just the final interaction, but apparently the entire scene. Keanu paused for a brief moment, locking eyes with the young man, who looked nervous but determined. The man gave Keanu a small nod, a gesture of quiet solidarity. Keanu responded with a faint smile, almost imperceptible, before walking out through the glass doors, disappearing into the Los Angeles sunlight. Inside the dealership, Richard struggled to regain his composure, but the silence around him and the accusing stares of the other employees made it clear that something had changed. The video recorded by the young man wouldn't stay hidden for long, and when the world saw what had happened in that showroom, the consequences would be as devastating as they were inevitable. By the next morning, the world already knew the story. The video recorded in the dealership had been posted on social media by the young man who had quietly documented everything. Within hours, the footage went viral, shared by thousands of people outraged by the treatment Keanu Reeves had received. The contrast was striking, a man renowned for his humility being humiliated by someone so arrogant. The video began with Richard ignoring Keanu and making disrespectful remarks, but the turning point was unmistakable, the moment when the manager attempted to assault Keanu, only for him to deflect it with unsettling calm. Keanu's line, "Respect doesn't cost a thing, but it seems rarer than any car here," instantly went viral, appearing on posts, memes, and even in newspaper headlines. The comments were relentless. "How could anyone treat Keanu Reeves like this? He's literally one of the most humble and kind men in Hollywood. That manager clearly thinks he's superior. What a disgrace to the dealership. Keanu, as always, handling arrogant people with grace. Absolute legend. This should be a lesson: never underestimate people, regardless of how they appear. Entertainment blogs and news outlets quickly latched onto the story. It wasn't just about disrespecting a customer, but one of the most respected actors in the world. The public narrative not only defended Keanu but also criticized elitist and prejudiced practices in luxurious spaces like that dealership. At the dealership, the fallout was immediate and devastating. The company's social media pages were flooded with negative comments demanding explanations and apologies. Criticism came from all corners of the world, with people announcing boycotts and calling for the manager's dismissal. Richard attempted to justify his actions, but every statement he made seemed to worsen the situation. His explanations were riddled with empty excuses and showed no genuine remorse. The situation was a misunderstanding. I didn't immediately recognize Mr. Reeves, and my behavior was misinterpreted. The public wasn't buying it. The collective outrage was unstoppable. Employees at the dealership, fearing for their jobs, began speaking anonymously to the press, confirming that Richard's behavior wasn't new. He's always treated people like that. It didn't matter if they were rich or not. He thought he was better than everyone, one employee revealed. This only fueled the fire of public indignation. The dealership lost significant clients and saw its sales numbers plummet. No one wanted to be associated with a place carrying such a tarnished reputation. While the world buzzed with the incident, Keanu remained silent. He had never been one to seek revenge or fuel conflicts. At home, surrounded by the simplicity that always defined him, he reflected on what had happened. He knew the situation wasn't unique. Prejudice based on appearance, social status, or financial condition was all too common, and he didn't want this experience to become just another isolated incident. He decided to do something meaningful. Keanu shared his thoughts with a close friend. "The video is out there, and people are reacting, but I don't want this to end as just another scandal. I want to do something that truly inspires change." "And what are you going to do?" the friend asked. "Handle it my way," Keanu replied with a faint but determined smile. Keanu knew he had to return to that dealership, not to retaliate, but to turn the situation into a powerful lesson. After hanging up the phone, he thought again about the car he still wanted. It lingered in his mind as a symbol of what he could turn this into. "I need to go back," he thought. The question that loomed in the air was, what would he do when he returned? Days later, the video was still dominating social media and headlines. Keanu Reeves' name remained a trending topic, yet he, as always, stayed out of the spotlight and refrained from making public statements. Still, he knew the story couldn't end without a meaningful resolution. That afternoon, Keanu returned to the same dealership. There was no fanfare about his visit, no security, no cameras following him. Just him and his calm, quiet presence. But this time, something had changed. Everyone in the dealership knew exactly who he was. Employees froze the moment he walked through the door. Some appeared nervous, others ashamed. Richard, the manager, stood behind a counter, visibly tense. His face was pale, and his once confident posture was now hesitant. The dealership, once bustling with activity, seemed eerily empty, a direct reflection of the massive boycott it was facing. Keanu walked over to the car that had first caught his attention. He placed his hand on the body, running his fingers across the surface as he had done before, studying its details. But this time, the tension wasn't in the car, it was in the room. He could feel Richard's eyes fixed on him, a gaze full of fear and poorly concealed regret. Richard finally mustered the courage to approach him, though his demeanor was completely different from days earlier. He seemed smaller, almost defeated. "Mr. Reeves," Richard began, his voice low and restrained. "I want to apologize for what happened. I think we got off on the wrong foot, and I hope we can start over. Perhaps I could show you the car that caught your eye?" Keanu turned slowly, locking eyes with Richard. The manager swallowed hard, unable to hold the gaze for long. Start over? Keanu asked, his tone calm but piercing. I'm not sure you understand, but the problem here isn't just how you treated me. It's how you treat people. Any response Richard attempted faltered in his throat. Keanu took a step back, still holding his gaze. Respect shouldn't be something you bargain with, something you reserve only for those you deem worthy. It's fundamental, either you have it, or you don't, Keanu said, his voice carrying across the room. Richard tried to reply, but Keanu raised his hand slightly, signaling that he should listen. I came here looking for something special, something that had meaning to me. But what I found was something that can't be fixed with an apology. That's why I won't be buying this car. Not from this dealership. The weight of his words was crushing. Richard seemed to shrink further as Keanu spoke. Employees and customers around them stood in complete silence, absorbing every word. Keanu took a step toward the exit, but before leaving, he turned back to Richard. I hope this serves as a lesson, not just for you, but for everyone here. True luxury isn't an exclusive car or a price tag. True luxury is treating others with dignity. And that, unfortunately, seems rarer than any model you have in this showroom. With those words, Keanu walked out of the dealership, leaving behind a heavy silence in his wake. Days after the incident, the video continued to circulate, but now people weren't just talking about what happened at the dealership. They were discussing how Keanu had transformed a moment of disrespect into a lesson that transcended the event. Once again, he had become a symbol of humility and quiet strength. Keanu purchased the car at a modest dealership that prioritized human connection over ostentation. The owner, a middle-aged man named Sam, was known for treating all customers equally, no matter who they were. When Keanu walked into the shop, he was greeted with a genuine smile. Welcome! How can I help you today? Sam asked. I'm looking for something special, a car that represents a greater cause. I think you can help me, Keanu replied. The interaction was warm, free of judgment or prejudice. In the end, Keanu found the car he was looking for. He took a photo with Sam and his team, posting it on his social media with a simple but powerful caption, "True luxury is being treated with respect. Thank you for reminding me of that." The post went viral once again, highlighting the new dealership as an example of how customer service should be. People flocked to the shop, drawn by the idea of a place where dignity came first. Keanu's gestures sparked a global movement. People began sharing personal stories of prejudice, discrimination, and resilience. Countless campaigns promoting respect and inclusion emerged, encouraging businesses to rethink their practices and behavior. Hashtags like #RespectIsLuxury and #LearnFromKeanu dominated social media. Celebrities, activists, and brands joined the movement, using the moment as an opportunity for reflection. Even luxury vehicle manufacturers started adopting more inclusive narratives, fearing the kind of reputational crisis that had befallen the dealership in question. Meanwhile, the dealership where it all began continued to face the consequences. Richard was fired after an onslaught of criticism and the loss of numerous clients. The dealership underwent a restructuring, but the damage to its reputation was already done. The incident became a cautionary tale in the business world, a stark reminder of the importance of respect. I never wanted this to be about me, Keanu said with his usual humility. This isn't about who I am or what I do. This is about how we treat each other. Respect shouldn't depend on who you are, how much money you have, or what you do. It's a basic right, something everyone deserves. When asked what he had learned from the experience, Keanu smiled slightly before responding, I've learned that even difficult moments can be opportunities for change. Respect doesn't cost a thing, but when we give it, we create something that can transform the world. The car Keanu purchased became a symbol. It was restored and auctioned off at a charity event, raising millions of dollars for causes that promoted equality and inclusion. During the event, Keanu delivered a short but unforgettable speech. This car was just an object until this story unfolded. Now it carries something far more valuable, the lesson that we all have the power to inspire change as long as we're guided by respect. The evening ended with applause, not just for Keanu, but for the message he had shared with the world. An incident that began with prejudice and disrespect had become a story of transformation and inspiration. Keanu proved that even in the face of injustice, it's possible to act with dignity and turn negativity into something positive. The world moved on, but the lesson endured. Even in the simplest moments, respect is what truly defines us. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.